Good evening. Today Russia celebrates its national holiday, Independence Day, but maybe because Russians haven't become quite accustomed to it, or because people's attitudes to the events of the last years are so diverse, this holiday hasn't become a common national one. But the 5 years which passed since the day that the first Congress of the National Deputies of the RSFSR adopted the Declaration on the Sovereignty of Russia is a sufficient period of time to attempt to evaluate what independence has given Russia and Russians. Probably the main positive result of the last 5 years is that we have finally rejected the utopia which was stubbornly propagated in the country over 70 years. It would, however, be naive to presume that from a totalitarian system something new would emerge overnight to suit everyone. And truly, for this something new during 5 years, only the preconditions have been created. Its construction itself will probably take decades. Such is historical reality. But today, unfortunately, for many Russians, life is tight, and for some of us it's extremely difficult. Within society, the social differentiation is increasing. 40% of the employed Russians barely make ends meet. On the other hand, the class of those who have is growing and increasingly defining the paths of the country's economic development. Here one may probably add that this year for the economy of Russia is a breakthrough year, so the Prime Minister Chernomyrdin assures. Another significant aspect of time, contradiction between the center and the regions. Incidentally, the greatest danger, and that was the collapse of Russia into many tens of lots or principalities, which was still quite realistic 1 to 2 years ago, seems to have been avoided, although at times at very high prices. What regards the international arena, where during the last 5 years there were losses and subsequent gains, Russian politicians currently with intermittent success are struggling for the country regaining its almost lost status of a superpower. And yet we live in amazing times. 5 years ago, Russian sovereignty was declared, and the red passport phenomenon, as heralded by poets, hasn't become one of the colors in the Russian tricolor scheme. Listening to the new Russian anthem, for some reason, we still involuntarily think the words, God Save the Tsar, because the current Russian anthem still has no lyrics. However, life is such a phenomenon which holds more interest for us in the future. What has already been is not as important, but what awaits us and for what we must prepare. But ahead are December of 1995 and July of 1996, and still a long, long history of Russia. And yet, celebrations dedicated to Independence Day are underway in cities of Russia, although maybe not as large scale as is appropriate on a common national holiday. Still gaping are the unhealed wounds of the tragedy of Sakhalin, which led to a multitude of casualties. And salutes and fireworks in many cities were cancelled simply because of a shortage of funds in local budgets. Much was spent on the 9th of May celebrations, but the celebration and the holiday for people isn't demanding in cost. The social-political life of the capital today was in the shadows. Streets of Moscow were empty, without demonstrations or marches. The heat forced the crowds to closer banks and water reservoirs. The 5 years of our independence was celebrated by few. For the majority, this was just another day off. Despite the announced itinerary for the celebrations, because of the resort-like hot weather, much was cancelled. For example, the competition of children's drawings on the pavement on Kresna Presna, children didn't arrive. But in the Central Park, they were the basic participants of the festivities. And here the people were relaxing. The recreational life of Russia, bells chiming, folk music, Russian songs and dances, everything was devoted to the lifestyle of Russia and urged those around to rejoice at its independence. The Ludstrev Orchestra dedicated to the lifestyle its best compositions in its performance on Poklonna Hill, but here obviously the fountains and the chance to splash about was more attractive. And this is how our independent Russians rested today. By chance in the hustle and bustle, I made the acquaintance of a woman. She seemed to be not of our lives. It seemed she in some way bore the resemblance to Russia, which stands aside and watches everyone. Is Russia my home a good thing? I'll respond, I'm almost its peer of the blue-eyed Russia. In the snow, I knew not much, and not such a miracle worker. I was raised and grew at her bosom. This person believes that Russia should regain its former glory and solve problems which have befallen it in the last 5 years. In Samara, the celebration of Russia's Independence Day coincided with the traditional day of the city. And therefore, the national festive relaxation is on the Volga banks, parks and squares since Saturday. The basic functions of the celebration were marked on the central square of the city. The program began with the performance of the national band. This ensemble is absolutely a participant of all city festivities. This time the musicians prepared a new composition, the Vivat Russia. Later, the festivities moved to the main stage where a theatrical performance was held. In the evening, it ended with a concert by the group, the Machine of Times, and flamboyant fireworks. On these days, the dual holiday celebrated in the rural parts the ancient holiday of the Trinity and our yet young Independence Day. These films we shot in the ancient village of Privolzhia. Here in the festivities, amateur and professional singers and dancers, musicians were involved. They braided a wreath while singing our ancestors' songs to the Trinity and more contemporary songs about the Mother Volga and Samara town in native Russia. As we broaden the parameters of time in the notion of Russia's independence, one can't forget another memorable date celebrated these days, the 775th anniversary of Alexander Nevsky. The Wreath of Glory of Alexander Nevsky, this is the name of the festival being held in Pskov. The Chudskoye Lake. Here, in one's thoughts, one drifts to the origins of our homeland. The victory of Alexander Nevsky over the Lavon Knights was marked in Russian history in 1242. The chronicler relates, citing an eyewitness, that the latter saw in the sky a regiment of God's angels, which came to the aid of the Rusiches, and then began to storm the foreign enemies of Alexander Yaroslavich. But not only God gave strength to the princely Druzhina, or warriors, the Pskov, Novgorodian, and Vladimir townfolk were fighting for their primordial Russian lands, which increased their strength. In the battle on the Lake Chudskoye and the battle of Kulikova lie the spiritual springs of the subsequent victories. The feat of Alexander Nevsky helped the veterans of the Great War who came these days to the ancient land of Pskov to honor the memory of the faithful son of Russia. Lilac wreaths rock on the waves of the Chudskoye Lake, and live flowers are laid at the pedestal to the monument. The image of the holy, pious, God-fearing Prince Alexander Nevsky, the intercessor of the people, is one of the most venerated in our homeland. The bells of the cathedral, named for the sake of Alexander Nevsky, begin to speak. From the abyss of centuries, we hear the prophetic words of the talented commander, the able politician and peacekeeper. God is not in strength, but in truth. On the occasion of the 775th anniversary of Alexander Nevsky, the President of Russia, Yeltsin, addressed Russians. He noted that in the year of the 50th anniversary of victory in the Great Patriotic War, the honoring of Alexander Nevsky acquires special significance for the spiritual moral rebirth of Russia. The President wished all Russians, and especially the young generation, to not disgrace the honor of forefathers, find a dignified application for their efforts in strengthening statehood and defending the homeland. Today in Sevastopol, solemnly raised were the military naval flags in honor of the national holiday of Russia, Independence Day. After the Sochi meeting of Boris Yeltsin and Leonid Kuchma, the Black Sea Fleet, for the first time, is participating in this ceremony within the status of a Russian one. This is the only fleet which, in view of the uncertainty of its status, today until this day, sailed under the flag of the military naval fleet of the USSR, but the Russian St. Andrews flags, which have been prepared for it, have been sewn by the residents themselves. Today in Sevastopol, the celebration of the city's day continues. It was founded in June of the year 1783 as the main base of the Black Sea Fleet. From the very beginning, the residents and seamen augmented Russia's glory on the Black Sea under the command of the famous Admiral Fyodor Ushakov. The fleet won in battle for Russia access to the Mediterranean Sea. A special page was written by the Black Sea Fleet and city into the history of the Great Patriotic War. Incidentally, in the military naval parade of the victorious countries in Petersburg, on behalf of the Black Sea Fleet, the patrol ship Ladny was present. Its return to its home dock coincided with the birthday of Sevastopol. The agreement signed in Sochi relieves tension in Russian-Ukrainian relations and gives a possibility to move ahead, noted at a press conference today by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Gennady Udovenko. The head of the Foreign Affairs Department expressed hope that the Sochi agreement would produce results quickly as a directive for concrete talks of delegations and the basis for work of the joint Russian-Ukrainian Commission. The agreement, also according to Gennady Udovenko, brings closer the signing of a large agreement between our two countries. countries. The independence of Russia is impossible to imagine without close interaction with its immediate neighbors. How is cooperation broadening with Russia interpreted in the CIS countries? This, our correspondent tells us. The Belarusian people at the referendum have asserted their desire to strengthen economic and political ties with Russia, approving the recognition of Belarusian and Russian languages equality in the Republic. The President, Lukashenko, managed to implement these desires partially into reality, removing customs barriers at the Russian-Belarusian border, together with the Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin. I'm very happy at the recent meeting of the presidents of Ukraine and Russia that at least some progress in the relations between these two largest Slavic countries was noted. Therefore, there is hope that we will form a large economic expense which will facilitate the emergence from crisis not just for Belarus but other republics. I know that we are fated to coexist. In Tbilisi, on Russia's Independence Day, the Russian Cultural Center has opened. It's also symbolic that on this day in Georgia they broadly celebrated the bicentennial of the Russian writer-diplomat Alexander Griboyedov. Today is the third anniversary of the Agreement on Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Aid between Russia and Kyrgyzia. This was the first agreement in the CIS of such a scale. On its basis, during 3 years, Russia and Kyrgyzia have signed almost 60 intergovernmental and interdepartmental agreements. Matters stand best in the military-political spheres, mostly in protecting the outer borders of the CIS. Here, Russian border troops stand, but their subdivisions, 70% of them, consist of Kyrgyzian citizens. A breakthrough has been noted in the painful problem of the immigration of Russians from Kyrgyzia. It's decreased by 2 times. Some of those who have emigrated are returning, and furthermore in the company of new Russians. Tajikistan and Russia have no common border. The small mountainous Tajikistan and immense Russia are divided by enormous mountain ridges, but these barriers are no impediment. Much brings us close. Just recently, we were one country. The Tajik-Afghan border is protected by Russian border troops. The troops of the Russian 201st Division have saved the domestic industrial objects from destruction during the recent civil war. They perform their difficult service even today. Russia continues to provide multilateral aid to the Republic. Independence Day of Russia is marked in Tajikistan today not just by the military and border troops, but by the extensive Russian community and diplomats. Tajikistan very sincerely always wishes to be with Russia spiritually, politically, and economically. I would like to take this opportunity, on behalf of all our compatriots living here, to convey our most heartfelt congratulations to all Russians and wishes for the well-being of our country and people. Russia is actively aiding Tajikistan in the process of national reconciliation, but peace has not yet settled on Tajik land. In the town Kurgan-Tubey, last night the commander of one of the armed forces units in Tajikistan was killed, the 26th Colonel Kuganov. In 1992, he was one of the prominent field commanders of the militarized formations of the National Front movement, which brought the current government of Tajikistan to power. In Chechnya, federal forces continue their offensive in the Shatoy direction. According to Interfax, the operation to free Shatoy will most likely be ended on Tuesday, and yesterday the artillery of the joint contingent of forces dealt blows to south of the populated points of Sovetskaya, Balshaya, Varandy, and Nozhay-Yurt. According to assessments of the head command of the joint contingent of federal forces in Chechnya, the DIF has only 5 to 6 scattered regiments left, in which, as of today, around 3,000 gunmen are noted. But not just heightened combat marked today. In Grozny, the triumphant formation of units of the contingent of federal forces was held. Today, the commander of the joint contingent of federal forces, the Colonel General Anatoly Kulikov, awarded the soldiers and officers most distinguished during combat operations national awards. Later, the small and parade and concert which were held on the occasion of Independence Day of Russia seems to have not created the atmosphere of a real holiday. And that's understandable. Today in Chechnya there is little cause for joy. Last night, during an attempt of a landing of an airborne division in the mountain gorge, one more helicopter of the Russian forces was shot down. The number of casualties and injured during that incident is being specified. In several areas of the Shatoy Gorge, fierce fighting is underway. The boundaries before the regional center of Shatoy is being defended by one of the largest and well-armed groups. The adversary, who has the ruling mountain heights and impeccable knowledge of the terrain. The command of the military operation in this direction notes that positions of federal forces are being shot at not only from heavy armaments and large-caliber grenade launchers, but even from multi-salvo installations. As a result of that, the attacking regiments of the 201st Motor Artillery Brigade in 2 hours alone had 5 people killed and 24 people injured on its side. The press service of the President of Ingushetia reported that today in the airport Slyptsovskaya, military helicopter fired at a passenger plane Tu-134 preparing for takeoff to Moscow. The plane received extensive damage, and only by coincidence there were no human injuries. The airport Slyptsovskaya for the second day is not receiving nor allowing takeoffs of planes. The press service of the President of Ingushetia presumes that federal forces have closed it down, fearing that Dudaev may use these air gates. Today in Moscow, the Supreme Patriarch and Catholicos of all Armenians, Garigin I, arrived. This is his first official visit after having been elected to the throne. In the airport, the guest was greeted by the Most Holy Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei II. The main purpose of the visit to Moscow of the 131st Supreme Patriarch and Catholicos of all Armenians, Garigin I, is to participate in the joint meeting of spiritual leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia, which is being held on the initiative and with the mediation of the Patriarch Alexei. Also to participate in it is the head of the spiritual leadership of the Muslims in the Transcaucasus, the Sheikh ul-Islam al-Shakir Pashazadeh. In an exclusive interview for the program Time, the Catholicos Garigin said that the Church, in its essence, is the bearer of peace, and he hopes to make his contribution into the peaceful resolution of the interethnic conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. In the itinerary of the visit also are dialogues with the prelate of the Russian Orthodox Church, meetings with representatives of the Armenian community in Moscow. In Neftegorsk, the city destroyed by earthquake, tomorrow to be interred are the remains of the last victims of the tragedy. The circumstances for those surviving the incident are complicated. The object of particular concern for Sakhalin are children who have become orphans. The youngest is only 6 months. After the national disaster, the district administration was approached by hundreds of Russians expressing a desire to adopt the orphans, but for now it was decided not to adopt the children, now tell their families, because on Sakhalin and on the continent they have other relatives who may not yet know about the fate of their Neftegorian relatives. Gratitude for aid in liquidating repercussions of the earthquake on Sakhalin was expressed today by the President Yeltsin in a special message to the Prime Minister of Japan, Tomie Murayama. Japan, on its part, has expressed readiness in the future to further aid the Sakhalin residents within its capabilities. The fate of the trade agreement between the European Union and Russia is in the center of the agenda of the European Union meeting underway in Luxembourg. Because of Chechen events, the building of relations of Lesser Europe with Russia was so bottlenecked that the largest European power finds itself far behind far less significant countries of the former USSR. Today in Luxembourg, heads of Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia signed an associating agreement with the European Union. Previously, Ukraine had concluded a trade agreement similar to the frozen one with Russia. Despite the seemingly technical matter of the problem, the issue in essence is to define the strategy of the EU relations with the outer world. In Halifax, in its business center, where just now they finally laid new asphalt, the street is washed with soap and the last rehearsals are being conducted by security services and folklore ensembles. If the latter can be seen on the square in front of the World Trade Center, heartily dancing to their Scottish bagpipes from morning till night, the sturdy fellows in civilian uniform brought here by the hundreds from all provinces of Canada are so well disguised among the tourist throngs coming in droves on ships and planes and cars that you begin to think that they don't even exist in Halifax. The security of the heads of state and delegation heads is the top slogan under which the Canadian government over the last month has been preparing for the summit. It's interesting that the sponsors' funds, almost $5 million collected by the business people of Canada, went to the needs of the security service and support for small business in Halifax. For 2 days, the leaders of the 7 countries will spend in the building of the World Trade Center, not immersed emerging before the public, and only by the end of the second day, weather permitting, and the analysis of the situation by security services, will have an outing along the bay on a just restored ancient yacht, which unfurled over itself 1,000 square meters of Dacron sails. Overall, nothing unexpected is foreseen. The agenda has been ratified. The documents are ready to be signed. Details and nuances are being kept secret from the press on special instructions of the Prime Minister of the country. In discussing political problems at the Halifax meeting, in the center of attention will be questions of European security and events in Bosnia. The Bosnian problem cannot be resolved by military means. This was stated in an interview to the German weekly Spiegel by the UN Secretary General, Boutros Ghali. And nonetheless, he predicted no more nor less than 10 years until the end of the war in Bosnia. But at the same time, Boutros Ghali stated that the UN currently is unable to play the role of the world's gendarme of peace. But one asks, will the peacekeepers also have to take on this difficult burden of the war, whose length is predicted to be 10 years? Especially since today all indications are clear. Boutros Ghali recommended that the Security Council give the green light to increase the overall number of peacekeeping forces in former Yugoslavia up to 57,000 troops. Evidently, the issue is not aid to withdraw the blue helmets, but exclusively extend their presence in the region. And the arriving forces will be called differently, a rapid response force. It's expected that they will be dispatched to Bosnia within the next month, naturally after a corresponding UN decision is adopted. It's difficult to believe that this entire military power will only be building bridges between the conflicting sides. Even now, one may presume that it will be unavoidably forced through various circumstances to make a choice. Incidentally, events indicate that that choice is predetermined and not in the favor of Bosnian Serbs. It's natural that such a distribution of powers completely suits the Muslims, for whom it's easy to be right and strong on someone else's account. Overall, the impression is such that it's beneficial for someone to conceal the true reason for international involvement in the Bosnian conflict. Because you must agree, it's at least strange to predict a 10-year war and simultaneously prepare for the imminent establishment of peace on the former Yugoslavian land. Emotions? Possibly. But in this case, that's not what's needed, but cold reason, and then there will be confidence of a satisfactory outcome. Today's rotation of events is very reminiscent of the scenario of the continent sliding into the furnace of the First World War. India does not have its own nuclear bomb. However, it does have the capability to build one quickly. This was stated by the Indian Prime Minister, Narasimha Rao, responding to the questions of the newspaper figure about the possibility of India joining the agreement on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Narasimha Rao noted that in current circumstances, Delhi does not feel it's possible to reject its personal factor of nuclear intimidation because of the nuclear program of Pakistan. The television king of Italy, the former Prime Minister of the country, Silvio Berlusconi, held a victory at the common national referendum. The majority of Italians rejected the appeal to place a ban on the right of owning several television channels by one person. Berlusconi owns 3 television channels at one time, and his opponents, the left-centrist parties, wanted to restrict his power, depriving him of one of the most important instruments of influence. However, the Italians supported Berlusconi. Moreover, they called for a partial privatization of the state television company of Italy, RAI. The results of the referendum far exceed the question of ownership of sources of mass media. Local political observers assess the results as an attempt by the movement Italy Ahead, headed by Berlusconi. He was forced to resign as Prime Minister December of last year after the betrayal by his partners in the ruling coalition and allegations of corruption of the management of the concern Fininvest, which he owns. The investigation is far from over in that case. However, Berlusconi, disavowing all allegations, firmly intends to continue his political battle. Chances at the future general elections for him have grown after the victory at the national referendum. Responsibility for the explosion in the Colombian city Medellin, as a result of which 28 people died and around 200 were injured, was assumed by the Coordinating Council of the rebel organizations. This committee unifies the illegal militarized formations of Colombia. In the statement of the organization, regret is expressed over the tragic consequences of the explosion. It turns out the terrorists merely wanted to destroy a monument created by the father of the current Minister of Defense of the country. Today, Colombian authorities have prevented an attempt at the life of the Minister of Internal Affairs and the High Commissioner on the problem of peace in Colombia. In the Parisian suburb Le Bourget, the traditional aviation space salon is underway, where 40 countries demonstrate their technology. How does Russia look up against them? Our personal correspondent correspondent Yevgeny Lukyanov tells us. The world's largest international viewing in Bourget near Paris of aviation space technology this year is underway under the motto of the super competitive in the battle, in the expression of French specialists, between European and American aviation engineers. The reasons are heightened activity in the sphere and also the low rate of the dollar, which makes American goods, including aviation products, more attractive in price. Aviation firms beyond the ocean staged in Bourget a powerful landing of their military and civil aviation technology in the hopes of finding buyers. Western Europeans resist the squeeze of competitors attempting to retrieve their lost leadership on the market of passenger planes. A no less heated battle is underway in the sphere of military aviation technology, especially combat helicopters. CS aviation engineers are represented at the salon as a solitary team, presenting around 20 planes and helicopters of civil and military designation. Among the latter is the strategic bomber Tu-160, which flew to Bourget for the first time, capable of launching artificial satellites into low atmospheric orbit, which was related to the President of France, Jacques Chirac, who became acquainted with our exhibit during his visit to the aviation salon. Russia is a special partner for us. In an interview for the program Time, noted the Commissioner General of the salon, Yves Michaud. On one hand, it's experiencing enormous demands in civilian airplanes, and on the other hand, also herself has an extremely high scientific technical potential in the area of aviation engineering. Hence, there is basis for closer cooperation of Russia with the West, and naturally, as we would wish, most of all on the European level. A heat wave, which has been continuing since mid-May in India, has taken 222 human lives. In rural areas gripped by the extreme heat and extreme shortage of drinking water is experienced, and daily interruptions in electrical power. Residents of India, with anticipation, await the monsoon rains, as a result of which the heat will immediately decrease by several degrees. In India, as a rule, tea is considered to be a remedy from heat. How it's drunk in the empire of tea, Georgi Kirichati tells us. Unconditionally, many types of the world's best teas are produced in India, but however, that doesn't mean that the Indians are too spoiled by the unbelievably tasty and aromatic beverage. Large manufacturing companies consider it to be economically unfeasible to supply to the domestic market the refined and exclusive and hence more expensive sorts of tea. They mostly are shipped abroad, but the local market receives good but ordinary, or as specialists term it, standard tea is supplied. Tea is drunk in India, English style for the most part, with milk, although with a unique technology of preparation. Sugar is poured into boiling water, concentrated tea and milk are added. All of this is boiled over high heat briefly, and then spices may be added to taste. Incidentally, some prefer the straight drink. As they say, everything depends on taste. Sanjay Kapoor has a rare profession, even for India. He's a tea taster. About this amazing beverage, he knows almost everything, if not everything. To brew a good cup of tea, Sanjay Kapoor says, one needs at least 3 things: the tea itself, equipment, porcelain if possible, and someone who really knows how to brew it. For a cup of tea from this Russian service, one must take 1 teaspoon of concentrated tea and allow it to steep under cover for not less than 5 minutes, and also never brew tea in advance prior to the arrival of your guests. Pleasant tea drinking. I wouldn't wish pleasant tea drinking to those who will include among teas what the Brazilian Indians brew, the recipe from our correspondent Yevgeny Vatiev. It turns out that crocodiles are extremely helpful for cases of asthma. Brazilian Indians, for instance, take dried crocodile skin, grind it into powder, and later brew it and drink it as a tea. For rheumatism, they advise a rub down with the fat of a boa constrictor, or if not available, heated monkey fat. For a strong brew, Indians love the best a liqueur made of coconut milk and domestic cockroaches. These and thousands of other original recipes were written down in the Amazonian forest, the Silva, by the scientists of the Federal University of the Brazilian state, Alagoas. It became clear that many serums extracted from tropical beasts, birds, and instincts truly have miraculous effects, and scientists became convinced that the dung of Amazonian parrots allowed to stand in breast milk reduces ear pain. The larvae of certain mosquitoes could serve as a powerful antibiotic. The powder made from shark cartilage helps in cases of arthritis, diabetes, and atherosclerosis. Sea turtles have a wealth of healing remedies. Their blood contains certain types of hemoglobin, the study of which, as scientists say, could help in creating broadly usable medications for various strokes. Also, most useful remedies for various purposes are snakes, frogs, spiders, and scorpions. So the Middle Ages medicine men knew the value of each while brewing their potions from them. In Petergov, on the day of Russia's independence, fountains of the large cascade were triumphantly turned on. They were under restoration for 7 years. How does this, one of the world's largest fountain complexes, look today? Our correspondent will not only tell us, but show us. Built more than 2.5 centuries ago on the inspiration of Peter the Great, the grandiose palace park grounds in the summer days always attracted guests, but today there are especially many gathered here today. For the first time after 7 years of restoration, the jewel of Petergov opens up, the large cascade. In just a few minutes, the ceremony of the launch of the fountain will begin. Now we have a chance to show you something which visitors never saw. You'll be the first. For more than 1.5 centuries in these grottos, concealed under the cascades, chaos of destruction reigned, and so, thanks to our sculptors and Polish masters, these artificial caves appear today. Here is the network of pipes feeding water to the fountains, and even a small underground museum with real stalactites on the arches and stands with the history of the unique fountain kingdom. But time. It's time now. On the order of the first emperor of Russia, the silver streams strive upwards, and again, as previously, covered up in liquid streams is the statue of the legendary Samson, the allegory of the Poltava victory of the Russian forces commanded by Peter the Great. In 14 years, we will celebrate the 300th anniversary of that victory, which became one of the major hubs on the path of the independence of Russia. In the end of the broadcast, the sports commentator will tell you about professional sports, but for now, a few words about amateur sports. The President Boris Yeltsin greeted the holiday day today on the tennis courts in the Rus Sanatorium, where the tournament, the Big Hat, was held. This tournament has been held in Sochi for the second time this year. Apart from Boris Yeltsin on the Sochi courts, the Russian ministers Pavel Grachev and Andrei Kozyrev appeared, and also several aides of the head of state. Many people would have liked to see this spectacle, but for some reason the tournament participants were shy, viewers and television cameras were not invited. Evidently, on the soccer fields, those in power feel more confident. The match in Moscow, the team of the government team, Ilyinka, with the soccer players of the State Duma, was held in an open stadium. The players and fans were relaxed and unbridled at the game, just as in Parliament. Vladimir Zhirinovsky didn't play in the game, but received a yellow card from the referee. Standing at off-field, the LDPR leader agitated the State Duma players to beat the government on the legs. Heat in Moscow at midday was such that the players often probably thought that water polo would have been better. Yet they exerted themselves quite well. The most beautiful goal was scored by the independent deputy of Tatarstan, Vladimir Altukhov. The first time was a tie, 1-1. Incidentally, the athletic match between the two branches of government was presided over by one of our most professional referees, Valery Budenko. Is it possible that the first, in disputes between parliament and government, you were often arbitrator, and now you're on the soccer field as a referee? I think that if my interference may yield benefit, it's possible and good, although we have too many advisors in our country. Very much attempting to inspire the State Duma team was Deputy Zhirinovsky. When, however, the parliamentarians missed the second goal, he complained that on the government team there's not a single minister. If there were ministers, they would have all died like dogs long ago. They're all weak and sick. Give the ball to Zhirinovsky. Zhirinovsky. Trainer? Who's your trainer, Sasha? Lovchik. And who's Lovchik? The trainer should be himself, the chairman of the State Duma. Rybkin should have been here, standing there perhaps, running around in his athletic briefs, exercising, ready to come in from behind. But where is he running around? As a result, legislators lost 1-2, and after the end of the spectacle, the Deputy Zhirinovsky scored a goal into the nets, which were defended by Deputy Marachev. However, this did happen after the final whistle. Good evening on Channel 1, the Sports News. As always, after the weekend in our broadcast, we have much soccer news, especially since yesterday several qualifying matches in the European Championships were held. Will begin in order. The goal of Yuri Kaletsins in the beginning of first time brought the Ukrainian team a sensational victory over the undisputed victor of the group, the Croats. The match was in Kiev. The first defeat in the current cycle was suffered at home by the Irish team. Our rivals in the group, Finns, beat the Greeks at home. I'll remind you the match Finns and Russians will be in mid-August. One more surprise was provided by the Iceland team at home, beating the Hungarian team 2-1. And this match and the rest, which were held last week, confirmed again and again that there are no weak rivals left in Europe. As we've already reported, the Brazilian team won the Stanley Rosa Cup, beating the hosts of the tournament, the English, in the last game. Juventus, the golden double in the 95 season, goals in the second final, matched by Parini and Ravanelli. From the match of the Spanish Championships, we'll single out the Betis-Seville game. The hosts won 2-1. Goals were by Kovalchuk and Sabas. Hence, one round before the end of the championships, Betis is in third place and guaranteed itself a place in the UEFA tournament. Last time the Spanish club was in the European tournaments back in 1978. In the United States, the tournament, the U.S. Cup 95, has started. In the opening match of the hosts, which included players who were brilliant at the World Championships, beat another participant of last year's finals, the Nigerian team, 3-2. In the tournament also are the Mexican and Colombian teams. Although the European season has virtually ended, many clubs have decided to bring their mastery to other continents. In the first match of its Asian tour, the Milan team successfully played in Japan with a major victory and entertaining fans with some magnificent goals. Today, the new ratings of the Association of Professional Tennis Players has been announced. As you understand, after the end of the Open French Championships yesterday, serious changes have occurred. The victory of yesterday's finals, the Austrian Thomas Muster made 2 steps upward, taking his best career position, 3rd place in the ratings. Incidentally, according to the prizes, Muster is the leader in the season. Evgeny Kafelnikov rose from 9th to 7th place. Late last night at the Gilles-Villiers Autodrome in Montreal, the 6th phase of the Formula One Grand Prix Canada took place. Probably it's fate that on his birthday, the Frenchman Jean Alesi, who turned 31 years of age, held such a long-awaited first victory in his career, but about everything in order. Alesi started in the 5th position, but very soon David Coulthard was off the track. Passing further his partner Berger, he took 3rd place. Schumacher, Hill, Alesi, that was the sequence of the leading trio. In a grand maneuver, Jean passed Hill, who eventually came out of the race, and Schumacher only remained, but because of technical problems, he lost about 1.5 minutes in the box. Alesi's path for victory was open. This was the first success of a Ferrari in the current season. In the overall order of players, the order of players remains unchanged, but intrigue mounts. The next race will be in France. Other sports events. The Russian Yevgeny Berzin became the winner of the Marathon Trophy bicycle race Bicicleto Basco in Spain. 4 seconds behind was the Swiss racer Alex Zuli. And finally, news from North America. Detroit in the finals of the Stanley Cup, winning the 5th match in the series against Chicago. The Red Wings won 4-1. The victory goal in this game was scored by Kozlov. In the pair, Philadelphia, New Jersey, the team of rare persistence wins away from home. Last year's NBA champion, the Houston Rockets, is one step from repeating its successful story. Houston has held its 3rd straight victory in the finals over Orlando, this time 106-103, and lead in the series with a dry score of 3-0. That was the sports news on Channel 1. In conclusion, our clip of the day, the hero of which is Jean Alesi. For him, it wasn't enough to ride the track on one car, and he decided to use Michael Schumacher as a cabbie. All the best. Good evening. The weather for the 13th of June. In the central regions and the Republic of Crimea, in Karelia, the northwestern area, in the north of the Volgograd district, in the Baltic states, in the west of Belarus, and in Kaliningrad district, the weather will not change significantly. Here, it will continue to be cloudy with some isolated rains and thunderstorms. The reason for that is the cyclone over Petrozavodsk and the atmospheric front connected with it. During the day, plus 19 to 24. It's a little bit cooler in the Murmansk and Arhangelsk districts, and also in the Nenetsk Autonomous District. Here, temperatures are plus 13 to 18 degrees. The south of the Volga-Vyatsk and the northwestern central and central Chernozem areas, the central and lower Volga, the east of Belarus and Ukraine and Moldova are in the area of a broad lethargic anticyclone with a center over the central Volga. Here, it will continue to be hot, dry, and quite still weather during the day. Hours 25 to 30 degrees, in some places as high as 33. However, in the central and central Chernozem areas, by the end of the day, brief thunderstorms are possible. In the Rostov district, in the Krasnodar, Stavropol, Rim areas, in Kalmykia, variably cloudy skies with some isolated brief periods of rains and thunderstorms during the day, 23 to 28. In the Northern Caucasus and in the Transcaucasus region, variably cloudy skies with some isolated torrential thunderstorms during the day. Hours 21 to 26 degrees. Temperature of the water in the Black Sea, 19 to 21. In the Sea of Azov, 23. That's a little bit warmer. And in conclusion, the weather in Petersburg and Moscow. In St. Petersburg, cloudy skies with some brief periods of rain. Day temperatures are 23 to 25. Today is Spirits Day. From this day, the heat comes not just from the sky, but from the underground. That's a folk saying. Tomorrow in the capital, it will continue to be hot, with some light rain and thunderstorm possible only by the end of the day. Winds are weak. Temperatures are higher than in Crimea and the Caucasus. At night, plus 16 to 18 during the day, 21 to 30 degrees. This is the weather expected for tomorrow. All the best. Goodbye.